program today is on 3 tracks that we have divided. It's going to be about half an hour, 30 minutes of presentation of the Italian data. Professor Alberto is going to be doing that. I'll be basing my analysis on some of the industry inputs coming in, as well as the CII data and some other global experts' views on how India is going to be coming out of this. I'm going to be taking about half an hour, and we are going to be leaving about half an hour at best. It's actually 20 minutes, but if there are many questions, we may be able to expand it by 10 more minutes. But at the 90th minute, this program has to come to an end, and that's how we're going to be running this program. As far as question answers are concerned, last time when we did this webinar, we had a lot of interest from the audience. A lot of questions came up. We had times to answer to many of those, but some of those could not be answered. Today, we are wanting to do everything that we can. We want to answer every single aspect of your questions. So please write them down. There is a chat box. Write them down. As the question occurs to your mind, please write them down. We'll be taking a look at it at the end of the second track by me. And then between Professor Alberto and myself, we'll be sharing and we'll be answering to your questions. If anything that remains unanswered, or if the questions become too many, then we are going to be taking those questions and you can send it to us at SDA Bocconi website at the email ID, and then we'll be answering to you as we go into the follow-up phase of this particular program. I'm very happy to tell you that there are large number of alumni who have joined us. We have from large organizations, many of you who have reached the position of business management hierarchy. Some of you are vice presidents and senior vice presidents. People are from industries, from manufacturing, from distribution, from e-commerce, from backend, all kinds of technology companies. I'm very happy to welcome you all. And please share your views as much as you can through your questions so that our young students who are getting ready for the world, they can actually learn from this interaction and they can walk tall when they go into their workplace. Thank you so much. Welcome you once again. And I welcome Professor Alberto to start off with this session. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Abhijit, for the presentation, and welcome to anyone. Good evening. I guess in Mumbai, at least most of you are in Mumbai, is evening now. In Italy is just afternoon. As Abhijit presented, introduced, I share my presentation. I try now to share my screen just to be sure. Can you see that? Please let me know, Abhijit, if you can see the slides. No. Sorry?
No, it's not seen.
You can't see? Let me check again. Before it was now?
Yes. Go on full screen, Alberto.
Okay. Yes, I go there to full screen. Is it fine now?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much again. Yeah, I organized my presentation, quick presentation, half an hour in 5 parts, some evidence in some numbers, figures coming from the survey. I remind you what I mentioned last time with my colleagues, Marco Bettucci. We interview and more than about 300 manufacturing companies and service companies working let's say in the manufacturing areas like logistics provider, IT, and so on. Then I would like just to highlight the differences between what we call risk management and crisis management and the way companies can face the uncertainty. In the second part of my presentation, I will try to introduce what Italian companies are doing and a kind of path for, let's say, moving from the resilience to what I call a renaissance, also to remind to something which is related to Italy and to Italian hearts. This is the first, let's say, slide related to the risk management plans and business continuity in the interviewed companies. As you can see in the center of this slide, 50% of the company answer to our questionnaire said that they don't had any risk management plan, and 50% they were, let's say, with a risk management plan. What is interesting, of course, is that if we take the 50% without in the past risk management plan, about, let's say, 65%, so more than two-thirds, about two-thirds of the overall sample are definitely moving into this direction because they realize that they need to address in a proper way such kind of events. And on the other side, there is another evidence which I consider quite interesting, because again, 63%, let's say, somehow consider, let's say, the risk plan they had good enough to face the COVID-19 emergency. But on the other hand, 37, so more than, let's say, one-third decided that, affirmed that, let's say, the plan was not good enough. Now we always ask these companies who, let's say, what is the origin of the risk management plan, if it was, let's say, pushed by, let's say, qualification processes made by the customers, the clients, and what they do in front of the suppliers. As you can see here, there is a quite, let's say, a fragmented distribution. According to the companies we interview, I would say 34%, they have a kind of full, let's say, process of risk management, in the sense that the overall supply chain is under control. Both suppliers, the company we interview, and the customers, especially clearly in the B2B industry, they are equipped with risk management. Then if we move to this center, 15% are companies that, strange to say, they are required by the clients to have a kind of risk management plan, and they ask to their suppliers to do it, but actually they don't have right now this kind of plan. Probably most of them, they are in progress, they realize how important it is, but actually we have to say that many of them, they are not equipped enough to do it. And finally, if we go to the bottom of this chart, almost 20%, 19%, they don't have any risk management plan. They are not required to do it by the customer, and they are not asking to their supply. So you see that there is quite a fragmented situation in which many companies, especially small and medium-sized companies, they are not enough equipped for facing that. This is confirmed by a series of data we collected. I'm just showing you some quick, let's say, snapshot. First of all, by distinguishing between large companies and small and medium-sized companies, we realized that mainly the larger companies adopted risk management plans before, let's say, the pandemic, much more frequent than the others. And they had some advantages. As you can see here, the companies that already had risk management plan before the COVID-19, they were able, first of all, to reduce the forecast of layoffs. So they are trying to keep the employment as much as they can. And on the other hand, they didn't suffer too much in terms of lowering their revenues. Okay? Clearly, it depends on the different industries. Some industries been, let's say, hurt much more than the other companies, the other industries, and some others are in a better situation. Also, let's say those companies that had a risk management plan and they see the revenues and the business, they, let's say, didn't, let's say, delay the payment of the supplier to testify that they are interested in, let's say, keeping in a safe situation also the suppliers, because they know that the suppliers are key players for the continuity of the business. So we have this first picture splitting large companies, mainly large companies with this kind of attitude, be prepared for, let's say, any possible risk. unfortunately, many other small and medium-sized companies which are were not able to do it. Now, why even large companies equipped with a risk management plan, they were not able, let's say, they were not satisfied by the procedures they had, and they had to face, in any case, some problems. First of all, because we have to distinguish between risk management and crisis management. And here, this is quite a recent research published by Professor Duruy on an international journal. You see that there are different types of risk depending on the frequency, the preparedness by companies, and especially the impact on performances by distinguishing between operational and financial performances. You see that, companies are usually able to face risk management because this is something that is quite frequent with low impact in terms of performance, especially operations performances and not the business performances. And it's much more difficult to face crises like the crisis we are living in these difficult days. And based on that, we realized that global supply chains and multinational companies have become much more, let's say, fragile. And this is mainly due to many, let's say, circumstances. Mainly is because the globalization and outsourcing that are practices that in the last 10 years, 20 years, companies put in place. And this make much more complex and less controllable the business. Secondly, the focus on lean management, so especially efficiency, single sourcing, minimizing the stock, made the companies much more exposed to the risk. Thirdly, the specialization in geographical concentration of manufacturing, the kind of national or local district that create a kind of risk of domino effect, okay? So they are located in the same place. If there is a problem in that place, like happened in China at the beginning, and then in Brazil, now in India too, United States, is very difficult, let's say, to mitigate the risk. And finally, clearly companies had to do it, so increasing the IT control monitoring, but there is another kind of risk, which is the cyber risk, which is not the object of today, but this is something that is there in any case, okay? I'm quickly moving into, let's say, the kind of risk. As you can see, if I'm just analyzing the ripple effect, you see that some, let's say, elements like, for instance, the exceptional risk, the fact that we have supplier unavailability or revenue, the redundancy, the need of redundancy and flexibility, the impact in terms of short-term and long-term elements, and the fact that we are decreasing the performances at both, let's say, operational and financial point of views, this is something that we recognize, and we recognize in the last few months, at least in our country, but I would say all around the world. Now I want to quickly move into a couple of examples of some interesting and I would say emotional reaction companies, Italian companies develop. This is a very quick but interesting story. In March, April, we had some dramatic situation in some hospitals, especially in the north of Italy. They ran out of several devices and equipments like valves, masks, and valves for ventilators, okay, which is the first, let's say, opportunity to face the COVID-19. A doctor working in a specific hospital in a sub-intensive therapy unit realized that there was some similarities between a snorkeling mask that is quite common, at least in Italy, and the mask they use for these kind of pulmonary lung ventilators. Immediately, he sent a WhatsApp photo, so in a very naive way, and made a kind of medicine lesson to some guys working in EasyNova. EasyNova is a small, innovative engineering company. They immediately start drawing the technical parameters for free. They put it on the web according to the approach of open innovation. And in 24 hours, thanks to the 3D printing, so additive manufacturing, they were able to produce the first prototype. Then they launched through web and LinkedIn a kind of call for engagement of makers all around the world, makers providing for free 3D printing and PLA, so a kind of plastic material for producing this kind of mask. In 1 week, they received more than 500 answers all around Italy, Europe, even for Canada. They had from Decathlon. Decathlon is a sport French company producing those kind of masks, 10,000 snorkeling masks for free. And in a few weeks, they were able to, let's say, produce enough masks for all the Italian hospitals. Now they are also in Brazil, USA, and Morocco. Another example comes from Ferrari. Ferrari, the luxury car company, was engaged in providing in 5 weeks a new ventilator by using reverse engineering techniques. They dismantled a ventilator. Again, there was a shortage of ventilator in Italy at that time. And by using the competencies they have in the prototype department, even in the racing team in Formula One, using a reverse engineer, they were able to dismantle the ventilator and redesign a new ventilator based on components you can easily find very cheap components on the market. And the project was named FI5, because in 5 weeks they were able to develop this kind of ventilator. And together with Fiat Chrysler, Magneti Marelli, and other companies, I mean, they develop this product, and honestly, they save many lives. Now, the question was, many companies did it, okay? So, for instance, even big brands, you can see here, Bulgari, which is a famous parfum industry, decided to produce 6,000 bottles per day of sanitizing liquid and 200,000 units per month. Armani, Gucci, Ferragamo, Valentino, so beautiful brands, they convert the production to produce 2 million pieces of surgery masks. The same made Prada in terms of lab coats. Even Bacardi, which used to produce alcoholic, they start producing sanitizing liquid, and many other companies immediately reacted, okay? But the point is, this is a reaction mainly made on emotional, let's say, reaction. Given the thousand and thousand of people dying we had in Italy, how can we move into a more structured approach? And the more structured approach for facing the crisis can be synthesized with this slide. So first of all, at the organizational level, by interviewing different companies, we realized they started setting a dedicated crisis committee. It's a kind of command and control room, usually made by a small number of people, for instance, 10 people, cross-functional teams, involving also external professionalities like occupational doctors, local public authorities, and the goal was mainly understanding the current risk exposure and develop a kind of crisis mitigation action and monitoring the situation. They appointed immediately a crisis team leader, okay, for instance, directly reporting to the board of trustees, and define a crisis protocol for, let's say, communicated immediately what can they do, okay? They evaluate also the digital capabilities because, as I mentioned before, there is a big risk in, let's say, not being able of guaranteeing business continuity through the digital, let's say, linkages. At company level, those companies started planning, guaranteeing information sources, let's say, define a crisis management plan and develop a kind of multi-scenario planning. clearly, there are two big issues. One is people, and the other one is the financial control. In terms of people, the point was first safety, so guaranteeing to keep people be in place and engage them in scenario action execution, to provide people clear instruction and reduce the anxiety. You can imagine in many companies there was a huge level of anxiety, and enforce the policy for people inclusions. In terms of financial control, the major goal is cash. Cash is king in this moment. So you need to negotiate with financial partners enough money to survive and to pay your suppliers, to negotiate with the government investment, and to revise, for instance, the insurance coverages. One example I can give you is for instance, Ferrari car. They have in Maranello 4,000 people, employees. They sell a lot in China, so they immediately realize the tough situation. They bought about 100,000 masks, and they provide to the 4,000 employees 8,000 surgery masks, so 2 per day, gloves, sanitation liquids. They rent flats all around the world for the quarantine of the managers. They bought it also oxygen cylinders for the local hospitals, and they offer to the employees and the families the blood test for checking, let's say, the virus. So you have to monitor this situation, okay, provide answers, and especially instill the urgency sense to the employees. Now I move quickly to the final part of my presentation, because I have 10 minutes. And according to the interviews we made to companies, and also recent, let's say, studies made all around the world, we can say that we have mainly 4 phases for facing this kind of risk. The first one is the reactive phase, which is respond to the emergency and be compliant to the safety rules for restarting the business. This is what's happened in Italy between March and the end of May, June, immediately. Then the proactive phase, which is leveraging the agility and focus on selected business continuity in the near term. And this is what's happening now between June, July, up to the end of the year for most of the Italian companies, for some of them also the first semester 2021. With the aim of moving then into the return phase, which is the third one in the short term. And we forecast that this idea of developing different scenarios and scale up again is something we can do it in the short term. So it means during the 2021, and then probably also rethink the business. So leveraging the main lessons learned and starting from the end of 2001, 2002, rethink also the business and imagine new opportunities. Now for each of those phases, I will leave you the slides. Of course, there are some keywords. I'm not able to enter in all details, but you can read it. Clearly at the beginning, the major goal is safety first for the employees, guaranteeing business continuity, which means revenues, transparency in communication to all the stakeholders, and try to redesign some work processes. So provide collaboration tool for working, for instance, in smart working, develop new processes for working in mixed smart work and at work activities, small team dedicated. And the major action are, facing the immediate challenges, communicate, analyze the available liquidity, and immediately analyze the cash future requirement, and then identify the major risk in your plant, in your structure, and develop first mitigation action. The second phase is, as we mentioned, the kind of reaction, again, work on business continuity, safeguard the revenues and the working capital invested. Usually here we see right now in Italy that companies are trying to select investment, priority-based resource allocation. They can't serve all customers. Some customers are not able to pay. some customers are not able to receive the material because the logistics in some lockdown countries is completely blocked. So you have to focus on priorities, okay? You can't produce all product, you can't serve your customer. You have to keep, okay, under control your business and manage a series of trade-offs. For instance, increasing buffer stock, improving multiple sourcing, but on the other hand, not increasing too much, let's say, the working capital. Here, the key point, the key KPI is the time to recover, okay? The shorter, the better. And there are companies in Italy now with a rebound in June, July, August, September, they were able to come back to the budget, to the initial budget, and to save probably the situation. The return phase is probably next year for many Italian companies, and the idea is to scale up volumes, but also increase flexibility. We realize that focusing too much in the efficiency can be a risky game. You need to be much more agile, okay, to work in a different way and to develop collaborative practices, both upstream and downstream, with the suppliers and the distributors, and maybe to find additional source of business, like for instance, the e-commerce activity we saw in the last months. And finally, rethinking. There are some lessons learned, okay? Today we have the pandemic, the COVID-19, but in the future we can have different risks. And I think that one of the major lessons we learn from these rainy days is that we have to change also our business model to increase resilience, to be much more proactive, to leverage digitalization, because I mean this is the only way to monitor end-to-end, let's say, the overall processes. And clearly, this is the major point. I'll show you just one example I mentioned last time. This is ARTSANA, which is a company producing, let's say, product for health and beauty care. Is 1.7 billion, Italian company located mainly in Italy, the headquarters. You see the flows, okay? So in Europe, they sell 52% of the business coming mainly from China and for other countries, okay? And 31 is made in Italy. In Africa, they sell 23% and again 62% from China, 31 made in Italy and 7% from other countries. And in US, they have a market of 26%, again 94 from China. So what's happened to this company? At the beginning, they had a phase one with a lockdown upstream in the production areas, mainly China, and also in some sales area. And this was immediately reacted. They realized that the major goals were not to lose market share, so ship to open channels, using, for instance, e-tailers. Do not lose efficiency in the production and the supply chain, in the warehousing activities, and strengthen the control of the working capital and the cash flow. They did it by focusing to produce some specific products, so they have to distinguish between what they want to produce and what they don't want to produce, and where to produce and where to distribute. So it was a very, let's say, analytical project in analyzing those kind of flows. Strong planning activity to avoid any inventory increase, so working mainly make to order for customer willing to receive and willing to pay. For the other customer used to work in a make-to-stock approach, they stopped the production, and then they work in risk mitigation to sharing material and products among different warehouses and safety policies. Clearly, having multiple warehouse, multiple site is an advantage because you can balance, okay, your stock from one to the other. Then post-lockdown, immediately after May, much more complex due to the uncertainty. We can say that it is easy to stop the production. It's much more difficult to restart the production. So they decided to increase sales volume through promotion and let's say produce according to the promotion. Okay, is a kind of Production followed the sales and keep the focus on efficiency and working capital reduction. High frequency and planning and forecasting driven by sell out in terms of mix and volume. So the idea was to have this kind of control tower and then monitor end to end in the business. Okay, according to the sell out, they plan the production and they develop the forecast. They started reducing as much as they can the lead time, and they use a lot of simulation to work with different demand scenarios and adjust the production network functioning. So as we saw last time, they move from a lean approach to a more agile approach, okay? So where you have demand uncertainty. And here there are, let's say, the major action they made. If you go down in the slides, you see, for instance, reshoring versus Europe. They come back to Europe. They evaluate if it was correct to produce in Mexico for the US, which was in trouble. Focus on the total cost of ownership. Let's say moving from different regional hubs to a kind of central warehouse in China, and then work local for local, okay, so for different regions. And clearly they did a lot of on this side. This is the last example. Of course, I have many others, but time constraints. So which are the major conclusions we learn here in Italy? First, risk management organization and plans are relevant, but not enough, because there is a difference between risk and crisis management. We need to develop new competencies and to develop, let's say, best practices in crisis management. Second, third, sorry, is crisis is impossible to forecast, but company need to work for mitigating the impact. It's impossible to forecast something like the COVID we had, or an earthquake, or a terroristic attack, but we need to mitigate. And we have to move quickly from the emergency phase, which is a kind of reaction, to a more structured path, which is return and rethink. And the key ingredients here are resilience, flexibility, but even imagination. So we saw that you can structure as much as you can, but in the end, people makes the difference. And you need people able to have this kind of visionary scenarios. And that's it. So I give you back the floor, Abhijit, and sorry if I just prolonged it for 5 minutes more than the time I had. So Abhijit, is up to you now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alberto. Don't bother about taking 5 minutes more. As a matter of fact, people would have really loved to hear you more.
Sorry,
because there's no time. There's no time now. Maybe we can plan for something else going forward. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for running us through the Italian survey. And I will take charge now, and I will have my screen. I'll have my screen now, and so let's quickly look at what's happening. Okay. Okay, is the screen visible to everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks. I start where you left, Alberto, and essentially, you know, very, very well explained the difference between ripple and the bullwhip. You know, something that you were saying, going from known unknown to an unknown unknown. I think the Indian experience has also been the same. And what we hear from the industry captains and what we hear from the rest of the consulting fraternity is very similar to what you have presented. Now, where we are moving from here is the known and unknown. You know, there is essentially, you talked about moving away from lean to being more agile. You know, when you are saying agile, we are actually talking about resilient. And this resilience is defining supply chain risk management plans in an entirely different way. We will come to the details of it. Now, what is resilience is very clearly defined now. Everyone is now accepting resilience is the strategy to speed up response, to minimize disruption. You know, something that we had in the earlier on where we are talking about the bullwhip effect, where we know that there are going to be small disturbances, many in numbers, and we have prepared ourselves to handle that. That's a known disruption that we talk about, the natural disaster, the counterfeit products, the theft and pilferage, supplier delay, production disruption, cybersecurity. I think the whole world today has tightened the belt as much as is needed to be very safe in the areas where we can actually predict an event and we can handle it as a known event. We don't know the exact frequency, but we know that sometime it's going to happen and therefore we are prepared for it. COVID-19 has actually, we have been delayed, we have been fence sitting for a long time. Everyone recognizes the fact that we were expecting something big to happen. But procrastination, if one may say, unknown was actually given the blind side for quite a long time, and certainly COVID-19 brought us back into the condition of unknown, where we were suddenly told that the market conditions can change completely. Look at the reaction, the world reaction towards China. Good or bad, we are not going into it. But the immediate emotional reaction is that boycott China for anything and everything that happens, starting from the US, the sanctions coming in like an avalanche, and the market conditions changed completely. Alberto said that in their findings, they found, they observed that the largest part of the trade was with China, and therefore China being out of bounds for some time had actually unsettled the supply chains of all kinds. The other unknown has been competitor gaining market shares. Suddenly you realize that there are new competitions which are coming in. Reliance Jio has given us a very, very good depth of understanding about how a competitor can gain market share. A company which was not there when the big brothers have been playing for the last 20 years. They have been playing with technologies which were actually outdated. Nobody wanted to bother about it. And suddenly you have an upstart, they come in with a new technology, they come in with a new philosophy, and competition has actually upset the market share completely. Low cost product disruption, the same example will work in that, and ever evolving customer expectation. Look at ourselves today. We are all a product of a zero distance concept now. Anything and everything, there's no movement. COVID-19 has not really let anyone have an escape route. Everyone's escape route has been closed, and therefore it's the first, possibly the first human experience to have been locked inside, while something that we knew had to be caged, the animals, they are now free to roam. This is what unknown has brought to us. Business has actually gone through a tremendous impact of this unknown, and the customer expectations change has been met very well. Those who are digitally, technically prepared, they have met with expectations very well. You look at your own food distribution companies. Every one of them have doubled their business. By their shares, if you really look at it, you will find that whether you are talking about Zomato, I'm talking about the Indian condition. Of course, I know that there are some of you who are overseas attendees to this particular webinar, but in India, the food distribution companies, the e-commerce companies who are into food distribution, they have just doubled their business over the last 5 to 6 months' time. They have taken into their stride this unknown risk, and they have recalibrated their business, and they have reimagined what could be their business plan going forward. They're going to be doing even more of that. So where we move from, the beautiful explanation that Alberto has said, that he said that just-in-time has now moved into agility. I built a little more on that. I said just-in-time moved into agility, but it also added adaptability and alignment, and it became more resilient. This means that our concepts of costs have certainly taken a blow. Just-in-time is no good anymore. We are now talking about distributing our presence the way it can actually be resilient. We want to be leaner in terms of our approach towards how are we going to be covering the ground. We are saying that let us move as far wide as we can. We don't really worry so much about being just in time. The philosophy which had given the automotive companies the idea of just-in-time, the Toyota production system, the lean management have certainly been turned on its head. You are now saying, just in case. Should there be another epidemic, how are you going to be handling it? So people are saying inventory is not a bad word all the way. Now times have changed, and therefore some of the leading exponents of logistics, let's say someone like Hans Sickler. Hans Sickler is known to some of you who are wanting to build a career in logistics. He has been the DHL Express and Logistics, Agility Logistics CEO. And he says, as the complexity of the supply chain evolves, the role of the logistics provider will also evolve to better address the many unplanned external influences. Unplanned external influences. So what happens is that as your assets vulnerability faces threat is when you bring in the risk. And this is what we are wanting to look at from post-COVID scenario, how industry and business is looking at risk and how are they moving in. So one of the first thing that has happened is decision-making has now shifted from a value chain to a value grid. We are realizing that it is not a consistent value chain that we can actually look at. You know, a steel company can have a value chain and be happy about it. A cement making company, maybe a value chain, can be happy about it. Or what about the fashion industry? What about the food industry, the food distribution industry? What about mobility? They are not a single chain anymore. There are multiple chains who are actually laid in a way which is most important for them to have the flexibility, and they create a line of flight. So a fit for purpose system ought to provide a consistent real-time measurement of risk. Risk will have to be measured by fit for purpose. A risk cannot be measured on the basis of certain ideas of it cannot happen. Those days are gone. So there are multiple data inputs which come in, and that's where the line of flight becomes so important, value grid becomes so important, and these are geographic maps. You suddenly realize that you got to satisfy a client who's in another corner of the world. You look at the Apple experience. They have been the most resilient company. They have been shutting down stores in the US in a most frequent manner, because they have been mapping. They have been mapping the demography, they have been mapping the spread of epidemic, they have been mapping the customer behavior over there, and therefore they prepared their transportation on a basis that they could actually shut down a particular location and start a new one. And they needed transportation location data for that, environmental data for that, customer assets data for that. They needed to know that which are the linkages that they want to use and calibrate that. And they also had to map the hazards such as pandemic, crime, and theft. All these things, as some of you would be following, you would be knowing that there have been umpteen number of unrests in the US. Big markets have just been burned down. They've been looting. There have been all kinds of problems. But Apple is one company which has actually not reported any one of those losses coming out of those kind of things, because they could be resilient. It was unknown for them, but they actually had resilience by which they could sense and on the basis of that respond and be safe. So what happens in developing a supply chain risk management plan in today's condition? It's a 3D and 1S model. You know, a typical insurer or typical risk management manager is going to tell you that define, develop, and deliver the 3Ds, and then you sustain it. So what is happening today is an assessment of risk, the quantification of risk, and building of contingency. What is required for that is it has to be comprehensive. The SOPs have to be very clear. You cannot be ambiguous about your SOPs. Your charter of authorities have to be very clear. Now, most of the companies, as many of you are also going to be possibly supporting me on that statement, that those of you who are into digital transformation, those of you who are building blockchains, you know smart contracts. These COAs are essentially smart contracts. You don't really need an individual, a managerial intervention to crank in something. It happens because n-1 has been right, n has to be right. And because n is right, n+1 has to be right. So if you take the line of flight and you go from any parameter, any point of a rhizome, I'll come to that a little later, in a very heterogeneous way, if you really look at it, you'll find that there is a smart contract which is going to help you to be very, very comprehensive. being comprehensive is very important for your risk management plan. Accuracy goes without saying, it has to be extremely granular. You must know today the food chain people, they are saying that my cook has a temperature of 97.2, my packing boy has a temperature of 98.2, and my delivery boy has a temperature of 96.2. There's a reason for that. The reason for that is you are wanting to build traceability. You want to make sure that you can repeat your performance going forward. So if something has to go away, then you need to do something about aligning the business plan to the changed reality. This is why agility without alignment is not going to give you resilience. Agility without alignment and without adaptability is not going to give you resilience. So therefore, accuracy is a stage of pre-planning for your supply chain risk management plan. And finally, it has to be reliable because you want to make it assured. Anything that you do, it has to be assured. There's a product that you've got in hand, you have to be assured of the fact that this product is safe for you. And not only once, but repetitively. So repeatability is the other component that comes into it. So you assess the risk, you quantify the risk, you build contingency of the risk on the basis of you're being comprehensive, you're being accurate, and you're being reliable. This is how you can actually move into what the world is looking at today. So what I've done is I have essentially a lot of CII data is what I'm going to be sharing with you, but without mentioning some of the other thought leaders, I think this would have been incomplete. So I have some insights from World Economic Forum, from Deloitte, from Dun & Bradstreet. You know, you'll be surprised the kind of depth that they have gone into in terms of assessment of risk, how the risk mitigation plan has to move away from where it was into the times of being resilient. So there are some of these World Economic Forum, they have the Sustainable Development Impact Summit, and in that they have the Global Lighthouse Project. Many of you who are following World Economic Forum, you'll know that these Lighthouse projects are actually the ideal projects which you can build in terms of manufacturing and distribution supply chain. There are 14 of them, 54 of them are being added into that, and they are guiding the Great Reset. They are calling it as a Great Reset. They are saying that it's not something you can't tinker with it and you can be happy. You have actually got to shift on the 4 paradigms. And these are improved agility and customer centricity. So it has now become your performance is going to be defined by the kind of conduct you have in mind. Your conduct is going to define what structure is going to be there, and the structure is going to give you your performance. That's what resilience is. Your conduct comes before your structure. So far, we have fixed the structure. We have said that we want to have a business of power distribution. So I have fixed my structure. And then I decided what conduct I'm going to have. So obviously, we have not been able to be agile. We have not been able to have resilience to meet the kind of difficulties that we have otherwise. So the Great Reset is in terms of improved agility and customer centricity. The second one is the supply chain resilience. It provides a competitive advantage. It requires connected supply chains, reconfigurable entire supplier ecosystem, and regionalization. From globalization, the view is moving into regionalization, as Professor Alberto has already shown you. The third pillar, the third Great Reset, is in terms of speed and productivity. And this is where your increased level of automation comes in. Many of you, most of you, are actually driven by digital transformation. So you will understand the words, what it means to have an increased level of automation. It's not a patch. It cannot have a Band-Aid. You actually have a complete amputation of a limb if you want to save the body. So that's what speed and productivity is for you. And eco-efficiency to ensure compliances. You remember, the whole world is today debating the shareholders' view versus the stakeholders' view. And therefore, the stakeholders, the people, planet, and profit is moving into the center stage. Be prepared for it. Be prepared for it. You cannot have a business plan which is only going to have an economic view. It has to have the social, the ecological view. It also has to have the environmental view. So this is what World Economic Forum is talking about, and this is the action platform for COVID. So they have come in with this. The risk has moved to the center stage, and this is being done by embedding risk in business strategy. Risk is not an external factor anymore. Please remember this, that we have grown at a time. We means I include me and Professor Alberto in the same generation, where we felt risk is an after effect. But you are saying that risk is not an after effect anymore. Risk is actually there. Anything that I'm doing has a risk, and we have to be prepared for the risk. So World Economic Forum has now, they have changed the 4 key shifts that they have brought in. Is they're saying the agility and the customer centricity, the previous slide I said, and there they're saying what has changed in the world. For agility, they're saying demand uncertainty and disruptions. It has changed in the world. For eco-efficiency, they're saying increased global concern for environmental impact of human activities. People are talking about it. So it's going to be moving into the stakeholders very quickly. Many people are doing it, and suddenly you will realize that the way you have understood business plan will have to be reimagined. It can't really be going on like this. While they talked about this, the next normal for MSMEs, the small and medium enterprises, Dun and Bradstreet, as you would be knowing, they are actually a credit rating agency who also helps small, medium enterprises to understand how they can be more credit worthy, how can they be more liquid. So they have come back with the impact of COVID-19, and they have said that there are areas of severe impact. Your electronics, your power distribution, textiles, metals, they have had the most severe of the impacts that you can imagine. The positive impact, telecommunication, look at this now. You know, something that we would be doing inside a comfortable hall, each one in a handshaking distance, are all far-flung. We are actually having a zero distance. We are enjoying the benefits of telecommunications and the maturity of that. Over-the-top media service. You look at what's happening with, one of the most admired company today is Netflix. Why Netflix is admired? Because they can actually convert any idea into a content. They can actually show what's happening in a village in Africa, how they're reacting, or how they're moving away from the dangers of COVID-19. And this is what over the top can do for you. And this is actually happening in education in a big way. Our webinar, it's an over-the-top webinar. We are able to do it because the set-top box has allowed us to do it like this. Online gaming, this is moving into a virtual reality, a mixed cloud, as we are talking about. E-education, these are the positive aspects. And the high impact has been of media and entertainment. Newspapers have been shut down for a long time. Banking, the personal banking has suffered, it's taken a major blow. So this is where Dun and Bradstreet has come up, and they say that if you are one of those, then you please recalibrate your risk capabilities on the basis of these inputs that they have come from there. So they have come into this. They talked about new vocabularies which are coming in. Supply chain decentralization has become a major force for them. They are saying that those 4 PLs and 5 PLs, those plans will have to undergo a major change. And with our idea of a line of flight, we can actually have more people to move side by side, create a value chain so that it doesn't become, we can create a value grid and move away from value chain. Rebalancing inventory management. People are saying that inventory is not going to be lean anymore. We actually got to be prepared for that. And there's a rebalancing that's happening over there. And partnership with logistics service providers. Sometimes you'll find that there are logistics service providers who are actually doing human service. You look at a new age company. I'm very fond of giving that example, must have spoken to you for those of you who have interacted with me. We are talking about this company called Rivigo. They have got a driver relay system, which has actually been now patented even in the US. So they have actually become a part of your existence. So this is what Dun and Bradstreet is coming in, and they are saying this is how we are going to be moving in. What Deloitte Global is saying, they're saying supply chain risks are real, and if not monitored and managed, supply risks will impact business continuity. It will impact quality and compliance. It will impact price competitiveness. It will impact savings opportunities. While there are many companies who are struggling to save their pennies, there are companies who are actually making a lot of saving because they have now been able to build a platform on which they can bring many players and they can distribute the cost and ultimately be very, very cost efficient. I don't have to really go very further than than looking at the Zomatos and the Swiggies of the world. They're doing all kinds of things. They're giving you cooked food, they're giving you packed food, they're giving you all kinds of other things which are coming with it, including that of your birthday celebration cakes. So saving opportunities will depend on how you look at this particular downside of supply chain risk. Now, coming to CII data, this is something where I find total resonance with what's been happening in Italy. Professor Alberto has given you this, this impactful version of the review that has happened in Italy. And here, CII has come out with this. Now, this particular chart, this is the Ministry of Commerce chart. They are showing that in the month of June, we actually had a zero trade balance. You know, a country which is traditionally known to have trade balances of the order of $15 to $20 billion, suddenly it became a zero. So it should have been a very happy news, but it is not unhappy news because it actually is contraction of business. Neither we had enough market to sell the products in the market in India, so our imports stopped, nor we had an outside market where we could export our products. So the export also, though the export had grown a little, it still did not really match with what the import drop was. So the trade balances came down. It again went up the next month because suddenly the expectation of the international market is opening up. So our imports went up once again because of the components being imported by us. The risk here is how do you manage your contracts? How do you manage your contracts with big suppliers, those who are all over the world? And how are you going to be in a position to keep the supply chain moving all the time with your changed parameters of inventory management? So there were 5 pillars of CII strategy as they came in with. Workplace safety. You know, one of the things that Professor Alberto talked about is there's a lot of empathy that has moved into the center stage. You can see that people are actually saying that let's be very careful about safety of people. Let's be very careful about the health and occupational safety of our workmen. So workplace safety is one of the areas that CII has come in very well. It's one of the pillars for that matter. The other pillar is logistics issues. Those of you who are involved in logistics in India, you know how fragmented logistics is in India. So the biggest problem that we had in the month of May was we had the orders coming in, but we did not have the materials flowing in. So the logistics issues were discussed in a very, very interesting way. Most of those were sorted out. And today, I think that the gear has moved one full circle and we are once again ready to go. As a matter of fact, if the estimates are taken right, then possibly the manufacturing, the PMI is going to rise to 53 in the next month. It's about 51.2 right now, which fell to 4 and 5. Restarting industries is there some announcement? No. So restarting industries is the third pillar. I'll take you to another slide for that. Getting back the migrant workforce. All of us are talking about it. Something has happened, something is happening. And finally, institutional mechanism for effective coordination. As a federal country, we have a major issue on hand between the state and the center. We're all seeing how it is getting sorted out, how people are coming back into work. So the prioritization of industrial sector, it came up in this particular fashion. You can see that some of these employment related issues, we can see that some of them suffered the most. Automobiles suffered in a big way. Tourism is completely 500 points impact is severe. E-commerce was less, 14.5, but construction, complete standstill, just didn't move. Food processing, not that bad. As a matter of fact, they are now quickly coming back into the strides. Retail was bad, but it started coming back, and textile and garments at 450 was impacted, severely impacted. It has started coming back. And in the next slide, there is this particular understanding of export potential of total sales. And you can see that electronics, we have an export potential of 74%. And looking at what happened to our manufacturing, we suffered heavily because of that. So this is one of the areas where they went into the details of it. They came back with their 5 pillars as to how they are going to be organizing themselves for it. And Then they also went into the prioritization of industrial sector for startup. This is how they came in. Textile and apparel, you can see that it was in stage one, food processing in stage one, minerals and metals were in stage one. This is the place where the essentiality was high, the labor intensivity was high, export potential also moderately high. The phase two, you had e-commerce, automobiles and chemicals. You can see that already record sales are happening of automobile. Maruti has already reported record sales in the month of September during the current year, though a notch lower than last year's, but it's a major change from the month of April when nothing sold. And then you have electronics, construction, hospitality, and retail. These are the areas. Electronics, a high export worthiness, export potential, but not having the startup because your components are suffering. The components are not coming. A high dependence on one country has actually made a lot of impact in this. Construction, because you don't have the workmen. Hospitality, because nobody wants to travel anymore. Retail, again, nobody wants to travel. You are in a zero distance, so whatever you can, so whatever is the loss of retail has all gone into the e-commerce. And engineering and capital goods are now again picking up. There is no more delay. The export potential is very high. Orders have started coming in. The import dependency is also high. And there are certain rules that they have come in with, and CII has given certain guidelines for that. So where do we go from here? The chief supply chain officers, where do we go from here? So there are three impacts. Those are coming in from a managerial point of view. If previously we were underestimating the unexpected, suddenly we know that it's not so much unexpected. It is cultivate serendipity, your accident, your chance discovery. You go in for that. So there's more of innovation, which is what Professor Alberto was talking about. Large companies going into the manufacturing of ventilators or hand sanitizers or face masks. India has been not left behind. We also had our liquor companies making hand sanitizers. A company like Associated Breweries and Distilleries went for hand sanitizer manufacturing. Large companies, large apparel houses, they went into the manufacturing of PPE kits. They went into the manufacturing of the masks. So this is how we have now started accepting the unexpected, the unknown. We have started taking them into stride. The second thought train that's running into the managerial minds today is, rather than conforming to the majority, saying yes because everything else is saying yes, you have now gone into de-risking your ideas. You have said that let us go ahead and let's do more ideation. Let us de-risk ourselves from the point of view of development. The third aspect that's coming up very, very clearly is that this functional fixation, the tree organization, the hierarchy, the chain, the command and control is giving way to trust. We are now going into a more flat organization. We are also having a very, very clear understanding that without trusting, we can't move further. So what do we do here? So we have to actually look at a measurement process for resilience. We call it as rubric of resilience. So why organizations need to adapt to rhizomes and a discard tree? A rhizome is a horizontally spreading. It's like a water lily. The water lily doesn't drop a root to spread. It actually spreads laterally. A tree needs to drop a root for stability. So people are saying the stability is fine, but then beyond stability, we got to look at something which is going to give us the ability to spread, like the internet. You move into the orbits, one orbit to the other orbit. So there are 6 pillars on which the resilient companies are looking at making themselves more adaptable. So they are saying, we want to have network capability. We must be in a position to network with whatever comes. So not a value chain, but a value grid. A value grid is many chains coming together to give you the network. Heterogeneity is that we will not only be an expert in a particular way. We'll have to do many other ways of doing things. The same thing can be done in 10 ways by using 10 different kinds of materials coming in. Third is multiplicity. People are saying that we need to have more than one channel to spread ourselves. We have to be multiplied in terms of our efforts. For getting to the same end, we must have multiple ways of getting over there. Relational realignment, if something breaks down, then we need to really quickly realign by relating to what the previous and the past was. Choreography is something like creating a map. A map can expand. You can actually draw a map like an amoeba. A map can actually take the shape of your mind. So if you have a map of your product or a service, let it take the center stage. You're not going to be charting something on the basis of copying a design, but you're going to say that I'm going to be creating my own map. And then finally, mutagenesis. A mutagenesis is that your ability to take mutation in your stride. If you find something good happening somewhere, you pick it up from there, and then you bring it into your own stream so that your stream becomes far more stable because you have actually been able to spread yourself from the point of view of being resilient. A resilience, once again, please remember, the resilience is your capability to outmaneuver any block that comes in front of you. If you have a roadblock, outmaneuver the roadblock. So resilience is all about outmaneuvering the roadblock. And these 6 pillars that we talked about, most of the resilient companies are adapting to the 6 pillars, and they're building a measurement, method of measurement, the rubrics, as we call it. So the rubric of resilience is what is going to give you credibility in the marketplace and allow you to move in for the future. So this is what I had to share with you. I think we are about 5 minutes behind 8:30, but it's okay. I think fairly well done. So ultimately move into the design thinking process, which is a problem solving. If there's a problem, how do you solve? So this is your time for ideas. So as we said, that we will take a few questions and try and see whether we can satisfy you by the answers that we have as of now. If not, then we can always move in and we can always send the answers to you at a later time. Yeah. So is the chat board open now? Okay. So we have a few questions here.
First of all, thank you very much, Abhijit, for especially the inspiring, let's say, synthesis of this model you mentioned at the end. I saw many similarities, as you said at the beginning, with the Italian situation. I see some questions. Maybe on the first part, I try to answer, and maybe you can continue, Abhijit, with the other one. I received a series of questions. Some of them are private, some are to everyone. I try to answer in any case, okay? One question was related to the sample size, the geography of this risk management service, and what's happened to the business continuity plan. Now, just to give you some rough data, the sample in Italy has been made by 17% of large companies, let's say larger than 1 billion, 38% of mid-sized companies, and 45 small companies, so maximum 50 million euros. This is more or less the photography, the picture of Italy, because as you know, we are made mainly by mid-sized companies, some large companies. 78% were belonging to business, B2B, and 22 B2C. In terms of geography, clearly it was made in Italy. Again, the answers come from mainly north and center of Italy, but this is again related to the industrialization of my country. In terms of industries, I would say we had a series starting from the most cited, which was chemical and pharma, then mechanics, automotive, food, and then other industries. Now, someone asked, what's happened to the business continuity? Honestly, I would say it depends on the industry. In some industries, and then within the industry, different companies, companies were able to manage in a proper way the crisis. And as I told at the beginning, companies that already had a kind of risk plan, okay, they were able to react. And then is also related to other issues I will mention later on. Just to give you an idea, in June, July, the forecast at international and domestic level were a drop of 12% of the GDP in Italy in 2020. Now the update forecast talk about of -9. So, I mean, it is tough in any case, but 9 is much better than 12. And the forecast talk about of a rebound in 2021, or at least more than 50% of the drop. So that means that companies were able in the last 3 months, and we will see the last, let's say, quarter of this year, to recover at least partially the situation. Then someone asked me which are the critical success factor of the companies that were able to, let's say, to survive after the lockdown, okay? And the differences between, let's say, the ability to have a kind of crisis risk plan, able to manage this kind of crisis that honestly is completely different to what we saw in the past. Now, the critical success factor, in my opinion, were related to, first of all, let's say in terms of business, I would say cash. So companies that had enough cash to survive during this period were in better shape, or the bargaining power to collect cash from the banking system of the government. And you know that during crisis, cash is king, and this was one factor. In terms of business model and operations, I would highlight exactly what Professor Abhijit said. So, I mean, agility, the speed of reaction, okay? Speed is much more important than elegance in these rainy days, flexibility, and somehow the ability to reconfigure the footprint, the manufacturing footprint, especially for companies having multiple plants and multiple distribution centers all around the world. They were able to immediately reshape, okay, somehow the stocked inventory to better serve the areas that were able to receive the material and pay without increasing too much the inventories, because clearly there is a trade-off between the working capital invested in inventory and the need to serve these companies. Then another question was related to what's happened to the global sourcing. And another one before, sorry, what Italian companies did differently compared to the rest of the world. Well, I mean, Italian companies did more or less, I think, what the other are doing, and but I think that we have a kind of attitude, especially in the small and medium-sized companies, which is a kind of the attitude to react, the attitude to work in a serendipity, as Professor Abhijit mentioned before, a kind of embedded flexibility in our companies, and I would say the ability to immediately collect the weak signal and react. Finally, the creativity. The example of the companies producing, let's say, a pulmonary mask or face mask is a clear example of creativity within a system, within a kind of district. Another 2 questions, and then I leave the floor to my friend Abhijit. Let's say, I mean, the question is, what's happened to the global sourcing, knowing that more than 20% of the business and the supply base is in China? Now, first of all, we saw a series of operations like reshoring and nearshoring, which means not necessarily coming to Italy, but maybe in the region. So many companies decided to redesign the supply chains for wide regions, okay, local for local, Europe, Far East, and United States. But it is clear that in any case, companies will still continue to work in China, and in the future they can't change too much because the supply base is there. On the one hand, for instance, Italian government realized that in the last 10 years, we lost some suppliers that moved quickly to China, and now we have the room to rebuild it, okay? Because there are a lot of incentives, for instance, a lot of incentives to Industry 4.0 for improving the digitalization of manufacturing, which means reducing the impact of labor cost on the total cost. So facilitating, let's say, the reshoring instead of just gaining advantage of low cost in China. But in any case, we will continue to have suppliers in the Far East, in China, in India, in other countries. But companies now, they are much more aware of the weaknesses. So they are ready, much more ready to reconfigure the supply chain according to the different risks, the different crises, and rebalance maybe, let's say, the production from one side to another side. Clearly, I mean, we are all in the same situation. That's why I think we have to learn each other. Okay, I think that is in this global crisis and global discussion. I mean, sharing best practices or even mistakes can be quite useful for anyone. Okay, so those were the first messages I saw during my presentation. I see that there are other questions. Probably more related to what you, Abhijit, mentioned before. So I leave you the floor and maybe I will contribute.
Okay. Am I audible? One second.
Can you see the questions?
One moment. I think I have, am I audible? No.
Otherwise, I can tell you there is someone says that.
Yes, Professor, you're audible.
Yeah, I'm audible. Okay, fine. I just wanted to hear from you on that. Rohit, your observations are perfectly valid. ITC has moved into the center stage. They have already gone into manufacturing all kinds of safety, occupational hazard materials and things like that. It is also right that most of the companies that we know of who have a very strong social presence, they have also done a lot of work. And you know, you're talking about moving into food. You know, the quality of foods are changing now, and they also bring in a lot of immunity kind of a product coming in. And this is what resilience has given them. You know, a quick response to pandemic, and then you know how to come out of it. Ushamrita has a question about economies of scope and economies of scale. Goes without saying. You know, we are moving away from value grade to a value chain. We are moving from being an organization to being a part of an ecosystem. The moment you are in an ecosystem, you have actually got to take many things in the stride, going simultaneously. So the car that comes out of Tesla is not a car anymore. It's an automobile, which also has got an ecosystem of its own, which gives you the autonomy of being self-driven. So obviously there are certain things which will work there, which are going to be more to do with economy of scope. That how are you going to be able to manage the economy of the entire ecosystem and not of a product? So everybody, you look at the food distribution companies, again, it's become a very, very favorite topic for me, because by doing that, everybody has been able to release a lot of cost from the system. Most of these companies are giving you deep discounts. Most of these people are giving you, you know, healthy, sort of very good size food package that you're getting, which normally you're not getting when we are dining, you know, sitting and dining kind of a thing. So that's, again, an economy of scope that goes there. Another question from you is in terms of whether risk is going to be, who's going to be doing the risk. As I said, that the risk has to be embedded into the business plan. And because it's to be embedded in the business plan, is going to be a matter that's going to be moving simultaneously with the product or the service. If you have the product or the service, please have another part of it, which is the invisible risk into it, and build your product structure on the basis of that. Prasanna, your question about whether there has been any study for the mobility. Now, automobile and mobility are two different verticals. Please remember that. A car making company is not the same as that of a car mobility company. Something like cab hailing companies are going to be very different than that of the companies who are going to be manufacturing cars. No, I don't know of any study that's been done on the mobility companies. The car hailing companies, cab hailing companies, I have not really seen any study. If there's any, I think I'll be able to share that with you. Arjun, you are talking about whether organization should make it imperative to focus on leveraging advanced technologies. The answer is yes. There is absolutely no escape from there. If you do not have the component that can give you intelligence, which is the IoT part of the story, and if you do not have the middle layer, which is going to give you the intelligence, the artificial intelligence part of the story, you will not really be in a position to manage and map on a real-time basis. Resilience is being able to map things on a real-time basis. You are all going to be drawn into new dimension of doing business, which is about body double of your activity in artificial intelligence terms. You are actually going to have your actions being mapped and simultaneously artificial intelligence being applied to give you the what if situation. What happens if there's a roadblock between point A to point B? What are the other routes that we can take? Today, we can't do it because we do not have the real-time information. But with the customer needs, the customer expectation being that you'll be able to support them till the last moment, is become a necessity. I think most companies are moving into that direction, and I don't think there's any escape coming from there. I'll give you a very interesting example of a very, very hardcore old world economy like steel, iron and steel. Some of you who would be knowing about it, iron is typically melted. From iron ore, you make iron into a blast furnace. From that, the molten iron is taken to the steel making shop. And in that, there is a transportation that happens. Transportation of large quantity of molten iron that's taken to the steel making shop. Every steel plant in the world, they had a manual movement. Every ladle will be moved with 10 or 12 people being involved in it. Now, one of the largest steel makers in the country has already moved into an automation of that. So they have gone ahead and they have implemented automation by which the molten iron is collected directly into the ladle. The ladle is now taken onto a guided ladle mover, and that ladle mover moves onto the steel making plant and discharges it. All the 10 people that was needed for it is not needed anymore. So this is what the unknown has done for this company, because they don't want to take risk of their manufacturing being dependent on people. If the people are not there, the whole steel plant would have come to a stop. Such is the thing everywhere else. Most people are looking at how I can automate my process, and those people who have been involved in those regular work, can they be given a higher end of work by which the jobs can be designed, the products can be designed, the ecosystem can be designed, and you can move away from economy of scale to the economy of scope. So this is what I have for you. I think there are, about another 3 minutes?
I have a couple of integration to what you said, Abhijit. Yeah. First of all, I fully agree with you. I mean, risk management must be embedded in the planning. I mean, that's why today there is a lot of scenario planning, okay? Try to, let's say, define different options according to the different level of risk. And some companies are trying to, let's say, overlap, let's say, the situation, for instance, of COVID in the different regions with the risk, let's say, connected to the different markets. Regarding the taxi and car sharing, we don't have any recent research. I have just an anecdotal, let's say, data I can bring you. According to the municipality of Milan, where we have a huge car sharing and taxi, during the pandemic, we had a drop of 90% of the business. And even today, where, I mean, there is a more, let's say, reaction. In any case, I agree about the fear. They recover just 10-20%. Still, we have a 70% reduction in the mobility using, let's say, sharing media. Also, the public transportation are now better. We are close to 80% compared to the past. And the results is that we increase the traffic because people move in the city using their own, let's say, car and media. So that's it. I see just a couple of last point. Should Indian government increase the custom duty to encourage manufacturing more in India? I don't know. This is something maybe you can answer. not myself.
My answer to that is that
Protectionism.
no protectionism has brought any happiness to anybody. So there are, I mean, if you look at it, there are countervailing duties and sensitive items like steel, imports from a particular country. There is a duty that's paid for that. So it's done from time to time, but it's all sensitivity at a macro level, and therefore, no, it's not conducive to business. If you ask me, it has to be as far as possible free border, and of course protecting your own interest in terms of what you want to do with the society. So no, at this point of time, I don't think this is going into the center stage. It'll all depend on how the government wants to protect. There are things like we don't have a formal lobbying in this country, but then we have a very strong sense of what's happening in the marketplace. The government is very much with the ears onto the ground, and let me tell you that. We may be not knowing about it in detail, but then some of us who have dealt with the government from close quarters, we know for sure that the government knows about the market as much as you would believe them to know. So there is a question of total cost of ownership. Alberto, would you like to speak about that?
Total cost of ownership, meaning understanding, as you all know, let's say the overall cost from the design, from the source up to, let's say, the distribution, but even today also the recycling. So the opportunity to reuse and enlarge, let's say, the life cycle of the product in the way of having more sustainability. This is something which is, at least in Italy, let's say a revenge, because it's not a new features. Okay, we studied total cost of ownership and design for many years ago, but now companies are working also on that for increasing, let's say, the life cycle of.
I need milk. There is milk, right?
Sorry, I can't understand.
No, someone, will you please mute your mic? I think an external noise is coming in.
Sorry. And in terms of the last question, I agree with you. As you know, Italy is a small country in comparison to India, but Europe, I mean, is not for improving the protectionism. Okay, so all countries are for open customs. At least what we see is the opposite in terms of incentivizing companies to invest in technologies, maybe for bringing back business, but not for increasing, let's say, customers' duties and moving into a kind of protectionism, which is not nowadays, in my opinion, let's say, something we can see. Is more a battle from a political reasons than what the business needs. But incentivizing the new technology investment for bringing back maybe business, that is something that we see.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Alberto. We are at 21:02, 2 minutes behind where you would love to have left. For the audience, Professor Alberto has actually made extreme sacrifice in being with us. His daughter is graduating today, and he has to drive a long distance to be with his daughter, with her family, to celebrate the graduation ceremony. Congratulations for your daughters, please.
Congratulations, Professor.
Sorry if I leave, otherwise my family kill me, and I can't do other webinars with you because that could be the last chance. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ruchi, for let's say the beautiful organization. I leave you all, and I hope really to see you in Mumbai sooner or later. Okay. Stay safe. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye from all of us. Ruchi, would you like to deliver a vote of thanks and close this session, please?
I believe both of you have done a wonderful job in terms of both the webinars, and I am pleased to have you listen, both of you, in fact. So I guess, from me, from the school, thank you to both of you, and pleasure listening to all the insights that you have shared. Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure also to strengthen the linkages between the Asia Center and the Milan Center. So that's also the aim we have, Professor Abhijit and myself. Bye for now. Ciao. See you.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
So, Professor,
Bye.
I'm also ending the session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruchi. Bye-bye. Good evening.
Bye-bye.